up beside him, blaring beside Merle. He said, "There's still some good in this world." He said the hag was a poet for the common man. Got him through his tour in Vietnam. He was the first dance to a brown-eyed girl when there was.
Hello and welcome to Telling It Like It Is, UGA Extensions and Southeast Georgia's newest source for local, unbiased, research-based information about Georgia's number one industry, agriculture. Now, this episode, Savannah and I have talked and we have racked our brains about what we could do for a What's Going On segment. All right. And I'm excited for our featured speaker as well on this episode. But before we get to him, Savannah and I we've really thought hard about this, and we agreed that the best What's Growing On is one of the number one irritants during the spring and summertime. When I was growing up, even now, we get calls all the time at the office about it. So we figured we'd go ahead and talk about it because now's the time we can solve it rather than waiting until the spring and summertime. And if you haven't figured it out yet, we're talking about lawn burweed. All right, that's what we're going to talk about with this What's Going On segment today. Lawn burweed, Savannah, I don't know what y'all called it in your family, but for me, we called it stickers. You know, that's what we said. We got stickers in the yard. Briars or stickers. There was no burweed. It was stickers or briars. And we hated this sucker. And it's really easy to confuse when you should treat for it because you think it's a prickly plant in the middle of the summer and springtime. But really and truly, that plant's been out there before then, right?
Yeah, so typically with lawn burweed, we typically start finding out and start getting questions in the late spring, early summer for a couple of reasons. One, we start going barefooted. My daddy always told us we couldn't go barefooted until after Easter. And so after Easter, we would start going barefooted and you start finding them pretty quickly if you have them. And so that's part of it. The problem is that sticker is actually a seed. And so this plant has went through its full life cycle at that point when we notice it, to the point where we have then started stepping on this seed component of it. And so just like any plant, to get the best control over it, we have to do it before it gets mature. We have to work on preventing it before we start producing those seeds. And so typically, we want, ideally, and it rarely gets done, but ideally, if we have some really good pre-emergent herbicides that we can use for lawn burweed, and typically we would want to apply those in October-ish, depending on what part of the state you're in. Now, certainly in October, that's the furthest thing from our mind is what stickers we have, and so then you have a second opportunity to start getting rid of them, and that would be a post-emergent herbicide, and we've got a few of those that we have that are again really good that we can get rid of them, and we want to apply those in December and February. Now, one thing I'm not going to do in this particular segment is make recommendations on specific chemicals. Know that they're out there. We've got to have some additional information when we're talking to you guys to find out what kind of grass you have and things like that before we can make those recommendations. And so the best advice we can give you right now is, yes, we need to be treating now, and that window is closing pretty quickly to prevent those stickers going forward. But it would be to contact your county extension agent and have a conversation with them about what the best herbicide now would be to treat. And then while you have your calendar out, go ahead and let's put in the notes for October to come in and treat again to try to prevent them going forward.
And I think that's the thing with these weeds is, you got to stay in a program. You got to stay intentional about what you're doing. And like Savannah said, I agree. We do need more information. But I will say one of The biggest thing, if you called us in the springtime, so I'm talking March through May, and you said you've got these prickly vine, low growing plants out there. I'm gonna tell you right now, there is an opportunity that we could still treat for them. All right, so it's not out of you're not completely hopeless at that point. But what does happen when you do treat that late is that post emerge Savannah mentioned just a second ago. It's going to leave behind that spine, that prickly spine still. That hard spine's already formed. So you're still going to have them out there that year, but they won't grow more. So there is that to think about, because really these don't shut down until temperatures start getting above about 90 degrees. That's when they're going to start slowing down and start dying. And like Savannah said, when it comes to chemicals, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Temperature is one of them. So when you get to that springtime, when temperatures are warming up, your grass is waking up. There's potential there for injury on certain grass, depending on what chemical you use. Around here, centipede grass is probably the most common, but there is, St. Augustine and Bermuda are very frequent as well. And you can't necessarily use the same chemical the same way on all those different types of grasses. So you need to know what's in your yard. All right. So that's the other big piece. When y'all call any of your agents or anybody that you're trying to, even your local feed and seed store, wherever you buy your chemicals at, they're going to need to know what kind of grass you got. And the "I don't know what I have" comment will not work here because you can potentially get some issue out there burning it up. So your burweed will still be there and your grass will be burnt. So it's just not a good combination. So make sure you know what you got going on. The pre-emerge is the best way to do it. And odds are, if you're already doing your lawn care, you're already thinking about pre-emerge. You might just not know which one to use, or you might not have thought it does. You might not have even had burweed in your yard because of you're treating for your pre-emerge, because atrazine is a good one for it. So if you're already using atrazine on your yard, you probably do a fairly good job of fighting against this lawn burweed. But man, it is a painful thing. It always plagues our house back home. And Savannah mentioned, also we're talking about that November, that February. These are times where we're putting it out, or December, in that time frame. It's good to remember that in South Georgia, we could have a longer warm fall than a winter time. So if your temperatures are still high in November, that doesn't mean you get off from being able to use any chemical. There are still rules and things you need to pay attention to, because we're kind of like the enigma. Our temperatures and weather patterns down here, we go from 104 degrees in the summertime to now we just had snow. All right. So I mean, it
Snow,
comes and
and it's
goes.
going to be 75 on Friday. So
Exactly. 1 week later, I tell you, if you're not getting sick after this, I don't know what else would do it for you. But these are kind of things to think about with this lawn burweed, because I mean, it can be a sticky situation if you don't take care of it early, and it's always bad when you tell somebody there's not a whole lot you can do to fix it, right? So we want you to be proactive rather than reactive on this one.
So
Now, go ahead, Samantha.
going to say that one of the ways that we can kind of increase some of our competition with the lawn burweed in our grasses is to know what we have in a soils and fertilizer situation by taking a soil sample, so that we can increase that competition, which really leads up to our next speaker, Daniel, who's going to talk to us a little bit about soil sampling. Daniel works with us at the soil lab, and so we're going to kind of open the floor for him to kind of talk about soil samples and some of the opportunities that we have with doing that with our labs. So I guess, Daniel, whether you're a homeowner or a farmer, how can soil samples kind of ensure the success of your operation?
Yeah, thanks, Savannah, and thank you so much for having me today. So yeah, I mean, soil sampling is kind of the basis of any plant production. I mean, whether you're growing a backyard vegetable garden, or just want to maintain your yard, or if you're a commercial vegetable producer, commercial farmer, it's kind of the basis, because We know all plants need nutrients. We have to have nitrogen, we have to have phosphorus, we have to have potassium. So all of these different nutrients, and there's a whole lot more, they need they need to be in the proper balance. And every plant needs nutrients in order to grow and produce and maximize their yields. But at the same time, we need to make sure that what's there is going to be there when they need it for the crop. So, soil sampling basically at the beginning of the day, it's the opportunity to see what's already in your environment. So if you're growing a backyard vegetable garden, you need to know what's in the soil so you know how much to apply to your tomato plant in order to ensure that it's maximizes its potential. But also, if you're a commercial producer, it's the opportunity to, understand what's in your field so that you apply only what's needed. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the economics of your production. And so we need to know what's there so we know what to apply. We don't want to under apply, because if we under apply, then you're sacrificing yield for your nutrients. But if you're over applying, you're also reducing the economics of your operation. So if you're applying too much fertilizer, you're just applying more than you need. You're wasting money. But also there's some environmental concerns. So we don't want to over applying for both our operation, but also for our local environment as well. So it kind of gives us a good opportunity to apply what's needed for the plant to ensure maximum production.
Perfect. So you mentioned an economic standpoint there, and certainly your soil samples are going to cost some money. So how often should we be taking those soil samples?
Yeah, that's a great point, Savannah. And yeah, there's some expense to taking soil samples, the time to go out and do it. But also that generally there's an analysis fee that's associated with it when you submit it to the lab. So there's definitely some cost there. But if we're thinking about commercial production, I mean, it really depends on what crop you're growing, but sometimes fertilizer can represent 20 to 30% of your production cost. And so if you're producing a fair amount of acreage, that can easily be tens of thousands of dollars that could add up. And so it's a significant cost, whereas soil sampling is relatively inexpensive comparatively. So just small under or over applications can turn into a big either cost savings or losses there. There's opportunities to really to really mess up the economics if you don't know what's in your soils. But yeah, so generally, there is some cost associated with taking doing the analysis and taking some samples, but generally it's pretty low. You're only talking about generally a few dollars per acre to do it as compared to how much fertilizer costs. And then your other question was how often should we do it? So generally, it really depends on the crop, depends on how much you're doing it. We often depends at what your history is on the field. But if you're switching between a bunch of different crops, then you probably want to do it more often, like almost annually. But sometimes you can get away with going 2 or 3 years. But I would say no more than 3 years without soil sampling. Because we in the Southeast, we have naturally acidic soils. So if you're not monitoring particularly soil pH, it has the opportunity to change relatively quickly in just a couple of years. And soil pH is kind of like it's our master controller, a master variable in our soil. It really influences the availability of a lot of our nutrients. And so if our pH gets off, it's too low or gets too high or out of whack, it can really mess up the availability of our other nutrients. And so, really a lot of times if you're managing the field intensely, probably annually, but definitely no less frequent than every 3 years.
So just a fun fact, we had a home garden sample come in not too long ago and had an 8 pH, and I just kind of was mind blown with that because most of what I see is going to be closer to that 5 in some
Yeah.
capacity. Um, but one of the things that you mentioned earlier was not wanting to over apply and under apply. When you're talking about doing, dozens or even hundreds of acres in some situation, it becomes easier to over under apply based on soil samples and things. And one of the things that we've started seeing a big push for in the last, I'm going to say 5, 6, 8 years, has been grid sampling. So can you tell us a little bit about grid sampling and kind of what we should be looking at if we decide to go that route of being a little more high intensively managing some of our acreage?
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely seen a big uptick in grid sampling and zone sampling, some of this precision guided soil sampling techniques. And so just to kind of start off, like thinking about traditional soil sampling, like if going back to what we used to do and what we a lot of times we're still doing is, you'll go out to a field, you'll collect one sample, a composite sample from an area of a field that represents about 10 acres. And so if imagine you have a 40-acre field, you'd collect 4 samples, you'd send them into the lab, we'd analyze the results and send those back with recommendations. But if there were different results across that 40-acre field, a lot of times what growers are doing is either they're averaging the 4 results and then just applying whatever the middle rate is, or they're going to the highest rate. And so what that's doing is in either situation, if you're taking the average, there's some areas of the field that you're going to be under applying. There's some areas of the field that you're going to be over applying. And if you're taking the highest value and applying to that, then you're basically going to be over applying to most of the field, except for that little area that is at that high end. And so, obviously there's some potential issues with that. And so, recently we've seen a lot of, grid sampling and zone sampling start popping up. And basically what that is doing is it's using GPS technology and basically computer software to pinpoint different locations within the field. And you collect samples across that field. And then using that information, instead of just applying a uniform rate to the entire field, you would actually apply different rates based on where you are in the field. And so, it really, in order to maximize or use this technology to its fullest and its potential, you really need to have opportunities to apply variable rate technology. So ability to apply different rates at different areas of the field, even if it's crude and you just break up a field and apply a uniform rate to half of it and another rate to another half of it. You can do it without the expense of some really high level sensors and equipment on your tractor, but being able to use that information to actually segment your field and understand a little bit more about the spatial variability of soil characteristics in your field. Yeah.
So I am right to assume that most of our commercial fertilizer dealers and things like that have the opportunity in their vectors and things like that to do some variable rate stuff. But if a grower was going to do it completely on their own, or they were going to, pay, their grandson or their nephew to do something of that nature, what all would go into the actual collection of those soil samples?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a lot of, ag consultants across the state that can assist with this process. And a lot of our commercial fertilizer dealers and co-ops have the technology and will definitely apply variable rate technology for a service. Not all do. I know I work kind of across the state, and I know pretty much South Georgia is pretty well covered as far as variable rate technology. There's still not a whole lot of adoption in the Piedmont and the mountain areas of the state. There's beginning to be a little bit more adoption and a little more technology, but it's definitely, it's not completely covering the state at this point. But just to get started, I mean, basically, there's a lot of software programs out there that will help you with this process. But in general, just kind of breaking down the steps. The first step is, okay, so you have a field, you need to define the sampling locations, and there's software programs that'll help you with this. Some of them can be somewhat expensive, but some of them can be free. There's a lot of free mobile apps that'll help you do this. I mean, just think about Apple Maps or Google Maps that we use all the time for driving around. You can actually use this to help you identify sampling locations. So you identify different locations across your field, you know the sampling coordinates, you go to those locations, you collect the sample, you submit them to a lab, and you get the results. And then from this, what you need to do is you take that information and you kind of create a map. And I know a lot of our producers and a lot of people may have seen these, but we call them soil test maps. And basically they show different color codes for, the nutrients or pH across the field, and show how the spatial variability is across the area. So in order to do that process, there are some software requirements. Normally we call these AgGIS programs. There's a lot of them on the market that can do it. They can range pretty significantly in the price. They're extremely powerful, and they have a lot of other farm operation components, like measuring, or they can keep track of expenses and inventory, and all your logs on your farm operation. But at the core, what they can do is they can also map out and create these soil test maps. And then from that information, we then create what's called a prescription map. And so if we know one area of the field has a lower pH than the other side of the field, okay, well, we know that area needs more lime in order to correct and counteract and neutralize that acidity. And so we create another map, which we call a prescription map again, that is going to identify that area, recommend a higher prescription rate or rate of application. Then we save that information. And then if we have a variable rate tractor, we can then plug that information into our tractor and then drive across the field and make those applications as we're moving through the field with the GPS and the tractor. However, even if we don't have that final guidance technology and variable rate application, we can still identify areas of the field that maybe need a little more attention or a little higher application rates than other areas, and kind of even do a low cost variable rate application by just segmenting fields into areas that have similar characteristics.
Perfect. So UGA, certainly we're here to help with any of them, but how can our lab and our county agents kind of assist and maybe some of these more conventional farmers trying to get into this transition mode of potentially collecting some of this more specific soil data?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we actually launched a soil mapping program here at the lab in 2023. And basically what that does is it helps with this process. Like I mentioned, these AgGIS software packages, they can be fairly expensive, and they're extremely powerful. They can handle a lot of different things, but they're also they can be a little bit difficult if you're new to it. So in 2023, my lab offered or kind of launched our soil mapping program. And what that is basically if you can collect the samples and have coordinates that are associated with every sample that you collect, then you can submit it to our lab, and we'll actually create those soil test maps and work with you for prescription maps and create those kind of color-coded maps for free. So it's just part of, if you're submitting to our lab, you send us coordinates. There's a process that we kind of need to go through to make sure that everything's in order, but it's relatively simple. I've tried to make it as simple as possible. I've got instructions on our website where growers can go in and see. But it basically uses free software. So you uses Google Earth mostly, or Google Earth Pro, one of the other. Both will work these days. But you can just use your phone, go out, identify the sampling locations, send that information to the lab. I'll create the soil test maps. We can work together to create a prescription map, and then all of that information gets saved basically as an electronic file, which we call a shape file. And it doesn't matter whether your tractor's John Deere, Kubota, or whatever your case, they all kind of operate using the same sorts of file types. And so, we can't, handle the variable rate application process, but we can help you create these maps and really understand more about your soil variability. And so that's a program we're offering. And then at the end of the day, you'll get those maps, you'll get the color-coded maps, and get the shape files that then you can then provide to your applicator, or if you have the equipment, you can use it yourself and make the application. But yeah, so there's really a lot of opportunity. This program is relatively new. We're still kind of figuring out how we can best serve our clients. But like you said, Savannah, I mean, we as UGA Extension, we're here to support our growers and our homeowners. And this is an opportunity to just provide very low cost, because it's free when you submit soil samples to our lab, opportunity to kind of learn how this technology works without the investment in the mapping software and all the infrastructure. So it's an exciting program. If anybody is interested, they could definitely reach out to your county agent first, learn a little bit more about soil sampling and stuff like that. But ultimately, my lab is here to support everyone, and we're happy to walk through this program.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I always enjoy hearing you guys speak, because it's a little bit of something different. Even though soil is always the basis of everything, it's kind of something we talk about fertilizers a lot, but sometimes we don't come back and think about the actual soil component of that. So I certainly want to thank you for joining us. I'm just going to go through real quick. We do have some upcoming events for you guys. So January the 29th, which is tomorrow, we've got the Georgia Cotton Commission down in Tifton beginning at 8. And then February the 12th. So from the winter storm, they canceled the corn short course, and that date has been moved to February the 12th. And again, that's in Tifton. And then we also have the Georgia Conservation Tillage meeting coming up in Tifton as well. And that is February the 18th through the 19th. Do want to remind you that our annual row crop production meetings are currently going on. So make sure you reach out to your county extension agent to find out when those are. And in the meantime, keep tilling it like it is.
Still some good in this world. He said that Hag was a poet for the common man. Got him through his tour in Vietnam. He was the first dance to a brown-eyed girl, and there was still some good in this world.